Okay, good deal. And I can hold them up and you can see them when you rewatch them. Okay, so we are going to go over Henry and Helen Howard's. Okay, now, one thing I will show you, and you guys have this in your booklet there, that 1040, you know how when you open that up, if you'll turn to the one she got the forms, you know how I've told you at the beginning, it's like a half a page? That's because they were trying to go for that whole postcard thing that for the IRS, and I've told the other group, I know why they did it. Because if you look at it, it would make a full page. See, like that, right? It would make a full page. And if you look, you know, that first page, what do you notice? You've got your pertinent information. You've got the name, last name, spouse. You've got some health insurance things, dependents. And then you've got the signature lines right there, almost at the very center of the page, which when they did it, postcard version would have been that first page. Does anybody remember on the old 1040 where the signatures were?
Which one?
The old 1040?
What was
the signatures where you would sign
it?
It was in the back second page, right? So you can imagine if the IRS is getting things sent to them, or through the computer is getting things sent to them, they want it right there where they can see it. Because that is one of the most common mistakes if people mail in something. Say they're mailing in a return for whatever reasons. There are reasons. Sometimes people paper file. But that's one of the things is your signatures weren't on the front page. So they were having to probably flip to just make sure and verify when they got it that people signed it. Because if you don't sign it, they kick it out immediately if you send things in. So for them, it's great, right? So when I saw that, I thought, okay, I get that. I know why they changed it to that, because you can see the name of the preparer, which would be us, whoever you are, and then would show our information here, your identification number. That way, too, that's on the very top. So if Gustavo were to call the IRS for a return that he prepared, they would know automatically they can talk to you about that return. So that made sense. What makes no sense is the bottom.
Yep.
Okay? It literally is like, I mean, I'm trying to show Siloam and they're like, where's all this come from and why does it flow to this page? I mean, the 1040 was like, it physically, income was over here and then deductions were this way, so you knew if it was on this side, it was going to be subtracted. It just physically made sense. This makes no absolute sense. It's like, what I told them you want to think about it is instead of reading up and down, you're going to read left to right. So if you're on a row, okay, it may tell you in that line to refer to another schedule, okay? Before, there wasn't another schedule. That's where you put it, and then you went top to bottom. But here, you want to think of this as a summary. This is almost like a summary page of all the other stuff. Where before it was a summary, but not this simplified. Okay, this is like super simplified. So there are times, if you look at these rows, you may have to go to your other forms and other schedules to even see where it's coming from, right? If there's something on that Schedule 1, and I'll show them. If there's something on the Schedule 1, it's not labeled here. It may roll to here, but it's just going to be an amount. You don't know if it's unemployment. You don't know if it's, you may not even know what it is. So then you can't look at this if you're actually doing the return. You got to go look to the other schedule to even see what matches up. So for us, it's much more difficult, I think, used to the other one, because we knew we had those 2 pages, that was it. There was other additional small forms, but we knew we could get most of the information we needed on those 2 pages. You should have seen me a few weeks ago when I was trying to find a credit. I was helping somebody work through one over there, and I was like, oh my God, where is this? I'm like, where is this even? Like, it's like working backwards, and we just didn't used to have to do it that way. So there are going to be times, even when you're in the computer system, you're going to put it here. It's always going to roll there, but just know you may have to refer back if you want to see the specifics, okay? Now, for the sake of this return, okay, so we know we've got our top and our bottom, and then you've got the adjoining forms that things are going to go on, okay? So you want to think of it that way. So the 8949, Schedule B, Schedule D, Schedule 1. What they kind of questioned was, what does this all mean? Like, I don't understand. And I said, okay, you want to think of it as these are your support system, right? This is where you put them, but then you have to roll them to this, right? So it's almost like you're working in 2 different worlds. And you've got their stuff they bring in. So you've got your income forms, right? But then you've got the form that gets put on, but then everything gets taken to the 1040. Okay? Does that make sense? So when we say the word form, I interchange it. So if I say form, that could literally mean the IRS form. It could mean the W-2 income form. So I'll try to be specific when I say the word form, but I interchange it. So I could just say, oh, it's on form whatever, form Schedule D, because I'm just used to saying that. But technically the only one that's labeled form is 1040, but we interchange them in the office. We'll say, oh, it's on form so-and-so, right? So you have your W-2 forms or your income forms, whatever they may be. You have your 1040, which is where everything gets put, but you will enter it at first on your different schedules or your different forms here, okay? Now, you should have an 8949, a Schedule B, a Schedule D, and a Schedule 1, okay? That's the ones we'll use for this. Schedule D, a Form 8949, a Schedule B, and a Schedule 1, okay? And Cindy was nice enough to put those all together for me. Over there, I was just throwing them like, pew, 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 like, let's go, you know. But I had her organize them today because I want to try to get out of here by 7:30, guys, just because it's been a long week, and it's just been a long week. So, all right. So we're doing this classwork too. Now, top of your 1040, so we're going to start with that, right? You put in their name, social. Is there a place for birth date on that part? No. So the reason they list their birth dates is if you'll remember one of the sessions we talked about, I think it was the first one or second one, and you can be filling this out as we're talking, that depending on your birth date, sometimes if you're over a certain age, whether it be dependents or taxpayers, that qualifies you for some credits and that disallows you for other things. Sometimes it can change some of your standard deductions. We haven't gone over that specifically, but sometimes that can change that. And so that's why we want to have the birth date on the problem, but on the 1040, it won't actually be at the top. So that's one of the only things that's not at the top. I think they do that way they don't have all your information on the form itself. That's why I think they do it. For the software, we will put it in. So this is very similar in a way to how it'll kind of look on their data sheet. So that's why they give it to us on practice problems. Their address, it's all there. They're married. They are going to do joint. So that's going to be at the very, very top, filing status, name, socials. Now, the other class asked about the boxes at the top that say someone can claim you as a dependent, you are blind, spouse is blind, spouse itemizes, all these things. Okay, on here they are boxes. In the software, they'll be yes and no's or bubbles, and you'll mark them if it applies. So we have to make sure when we get to that point in the software, the one that says, are you a dependent? Well, if they're sitting there with their spouse and they brought in their baby and they both worked and made over a few $1,000s, they're not dependents. We don't have to ask them that. So don't ask them that. People don't like it if you ask them questions that you obviously know the answer to. Now, if that person's only 20, then that's a question we have to ask, right? So we have to kind of be thinking as we're asking and doing the return. It is kind of a give and take as you're going along in real time with the clients as you're looking at the questions, okay? The birth date it will answer for you in the software because you enter it in. It'll automatically tell you if they're over or under certain ages. Yet again with the address, contact information, we always want to be sure we review that first, okay? Once they sit down, we will go over kind of how that ebb and flow works when we do our policies and procedures, but it's always good to kind of remember, even if they're a returning client, to look at that information. They could have dropped dependents. Somebody else could be claiming that dependent from last year. Their address could have changed. As far as I know, we will have rollover information, which means if they've come to us before, that some of their stuff will be in the computer. So, hey, Mr. Customer, are you still at blah, 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 blah? Look at their form. They may forget that they moved. They may write it down wrong. So it's always good to check and recheck as we go. Okay?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So, for instance, that box you were born before January 2nd, is that due to Social Security?
Actually, it serves a lot of purposes. There's different, when you're looking at IRAs and certain deductions, some of those are age-based, like what you can contribute and things like that, and you haven't learned that yet. Some of those are age-based. And then also there's something called the standard deduction you haven't learned yet. That's like a flat rate that you get taken off. It's a little higher if you're older. So yeah, so that's what's going on there. It's just different depending on your age. Also, if you're blind or disabled, it can be different. So that's why those are there. Yeah. And like I said, in the software, it'll just be a yes or no. But on here, it's boxes. And guys, for all intents and purposes, we're considered to have health insurance unless they tell us they didn't. We're not anything special unless they tell us in the practice problem. Okay? In reality, you're going to have yes and no's, and you're going to have to kind of talk. But for here, you don't have to worry about that. Dependents on this. They have no dependents. It told us that. Let's see. So is there anything else at the top of the 1040 we need? For practice, no. You don't have to fill out the firm name. All that's filled in for you in the software. So for practice, you don't have to worry about that.
I'm sorry, I probably missed it. Are we doing a married filing joint?
Yes, married filing joint. It's classwork 2. I'm going to show that to the, in case y'all watch this back. Classwork 2. And so it tells us they're going to do a joint return. It usually will tell you the situations in the practice problem.
Okay.
We're going to ignore everything else that's on there for now, except, okay, so now we've got the contact information. We're going to start with the 1040 then. Number 1, always start at number 1, wages, salaries, tips, etc. Right? Now, how many people do we have on this return that we're working? 2. So what do you think we have to do with their income? Put it together, right? Because there's nothing, it's simplified, right? Remember we said it's simplified, so wages, salaries, tips, attach form W-2, that total has to go in box 1. So for Henry and Helen, what they did is on that second page, they just kind of combined both of hers to save space. Those are 2 different ones because remember they've got, you can't tell it because they cut it off, but they would have had different EINs. That one says Candy Smiles and the other one says Easy Mart. Okay, so those were both different ones. So both of those added up in box 1 is her total wages. So 1950 and 2085, that's what she made. And then he made 40, I think it's 8 or so. Guys, to me, guys, when we're practicing, as long as you have it correct on your page, if people get different 2s or 5s because it's fuzzy, I'm not concerned with that. It's not going anywhere but in your packet, okay? So as long as you can read over what you put and you subtract and add down the line correctly, I'm not so worried about that. But I believe it's 48,652. But whatever you see there's fine. And then her 2 boxes just get you a total for box 1, okay, for their total W-2s.
I got a total of 52,687.
52,687? Yep, okay. So 52,687, because that's all the actual W-2s, right? That's all that's going on that line, okay? Now, let's see what else we want to look at. So, if this were in real time, and we'll go over this later, but I always will mention it as we're going through. I think I kind of told you guys I try to separate it out. So if this were in reality and we were doing the return, I'd kind of stack the W-2s in one spot, the stocks in one spot, anything extra that's kind of oddball stuff in one spot. That way I can go down my stacks. That's just the way I like to do it, so I make sure I don't miss anything, okay? So if y'all want to put a little check mark by each box when you know you've added that up, we know we've gone over those. You might want to put a little asterisk by this on the front page, the itemized and the state income, because we may need to come back to that. That's random information we haven't used yet, so we may have to come back to that. But we did put in their W-2s. And then, so what is stapled next in our packet here? I'll tell you what, let's skip the stocks for now. Let's look at the 1099G. Okay, so 1099G. Anybody think of where that could go? That says state or local income tax refunds, credits, or offsets.
Schedule 1.
Schedule 1. That's going to go on your Schedule 1. Okay, Schedule 1. And that is, if you'll notice, 1 through 9 is reserved. That's because I think 1 through 9 is either over here or goes to something else. I couldn't tell you because I did spend a lot of time in Schedule 1 last year. But if you look at Box 10, taxable refunds, credits, other offsets from state. So, taxable refund, we've got the G. Let's go ahead and put that 90 on line 10. Okay? Now, here's the kicker with the 1099G. I don't recall, because we've gone over a lot, if we've talked about that yet, the differences in when you put that on a return and you don't. Okay? if they do that standard easy deduction, they're not taxed on that. So in reality, we don't know yet because we haven't got that far yet if they're going to be taxed on it, but I'm having you put it on there anyway, okay? If they did the simple standard deduction, we don't even have to put it in the return, okay? If they itemize, y'all haven't learned what that is yet, but that's where they take a bigger deduction because they've got oddball things and they want to try to itemize. If they have enough to actually itemize on federal, they're taxed on that, so we have to put it in, okay? Now, the old software would ask us, did they itemize last year? And we'd have to ask the client. If they're a new client and they don't know, we have to come up with our best guess. So the best thing to do is once we learn about the itemized form, we would ask them, do you have a house? Did you have help? That kind of thing. So then it kind of stirs their mind. They're like, oh no, I didn't use any of that. So you know they just did standard, right? So then you know they're not going to be taxed on this form. So that means they could actually bring this in, okay? They could actually bring that in and we don't even need it. Lots of times we have people, right, Cindy, that bring in things we don't need. They just get it in an envelope and throw it up there and they don't even know what it is, okay? So it's our job to kind of help them and know, oh, you don't need that, or you do need that, you know. Sometimes I don't even open the envelopes. Sometimes I'll drop them off and it's just envelopes. I'm like, they didn't even open it to see what they made last year. It's crazy. Or to see what they paid in, or they just brought it all into us, which is fine, no biggie. But some people are they open it and want to know everything before they come in. So yeah, for intents and purposes, let's go ahead and put that on the Schedule 1. That way it's there. While we're at the Schedule 1, I am going to point out some things to you because we haven't worked in the Schedule 1 a little bit. We went over it early in some of the other lessons, but I want to just give you a quick review on it. I don't know in our 11 or 12 lessons if we'll really focus on adjustments, but adjustments are very important at the bottom. Ever heard of AGI, adjusted gross income? We'll talk about that in a second. This is what the adjustments are allowed on your tax return. So some people do get these. And I don't know, like I said, in the first 101 part of the training, if they go over those, but you will need to kind of be familiar with them if you're doing returns in reality. So if you'll look, one says educator, okay? You'll know by the time we get to January what that amount is. They've changed it every few years. Sometimes educators automatically get a certain adjustment. It's a number amount. Sometimes it's $250. In the past, it's been like $350. It's basically what they've spent in their classroom, and the IRS says, you're an educator, I'm automatically going to give you this adjustment, okay? But the software doesn't just automatically put it there, okay? Even if we see they're a teacher, we have to technically put that, okay? Very important then for us to be paying attention what their occupation is, what's going on with the return. It's very easy to forget it. When we're doing stuff and we're going along, super easy to forget. So I'll try to kind of remind you guys as we go along, be sure if it's a teacher, that we try to remember that, okay? Certain fee-based expenses for performing artists, government officials, health savings account deductions. We will go through some of those before we're done with our training. Moving expenses for the armed forces, deductible part of self-employment, right? So that comes from that Schedule C. We haven't done a lot with the Schedule C. I actually don't think we do a lot more with it than what we already have. I know we covered it a tad bit on the income. You'll get more practice with it when we do computer work. And we may throw in a Schedule C before the end of the class too, just so y'all can see that. But that's where you do get to deduct part of your taxes on the adjustment. The software automatically rolls that over, so y'all don't have to stress about that, okay? Deductible part of health insurance for self-employed. That is another one of those little nuggets that people don't know about. I don't have a lot that have come in that have been self-employed that pay for their own benefits. A lot of them usually are on the exchange or get Medicaid. But if we have someone that pays any kind of deduction or premiums, that's where that would go. Penalty on early withdrawal of savings. I don't see that a lot. We don't see alimony a lot. IRA deduction. So that is if you have a private IRA, like you open one up at a bank, and you put in so much, you can get a deduction on here. That's a little one of those nuggets that if someone like owes money, sometimes we'll say, well, hey, do you have money to throw in an IRA? It'll get you a deduction on your taxes. And that's where that would go if that happens. Student loan interest. You will see quite a few of those. That's where if you pay student loans, you can get an interest deduction on those. Sometimes people don't know about it. Sometimes it's up for us to kind of If we know they're a student or have been in school, or maybe they're in a field where they probably would have went to college, we could say, hey, do you pay on student loans? That's another one of those adjustments there. Up at the top, we've got other income. We've got the business, capital gains. We will move on to that here in a minute because we will put some on this form. Let's see, what else? If you'll notice on capital gains and business, it does say gain or a loss, okay? So that will go on there, gain or a loss, because where's all that going to flow to? Well, it will flow over here eventually, okay? So the pluses and minuses will go over here eventually, right? And if you look, it even tells you it's going to go on line 6, okay, of your other return. So it will go to that other line over here on the tax return on line 6. If you look at 22, it says combine the amounts in the far right column. If you don't have any adjustments, enter it here and put it on line 6 of the 1040. Okay? Now the difference in the old 1040 is you were linear, so you'd put them out here and you just keep subtracting. This is just kind of more work, right? Unfortunately. So, that being said, we do have some more forms besides the state and local tax form. So we're going to leave that 90 there. Okay. Let's go back to our income forms. And we're going to look at this big old stock form. Okay. This nice stock form. Now, what will usually happen with this, I want you to look at it. So there is a 1099 DIV. There is a 1099 INT. And then at the bottom, there's a 1099B. Okay? So there's actually 3 different income forms. They just combined it onto that one page. They don't usually come on all one page. Sometimes there will be summary pages. And so usually most stocks will come in on like 6, 8, 10 pages worth. We have to dig through and find the actual summary that we need to put in. It can be a little daunting. Before we get done, and maybe if not before December, at some point before we actually do some real taxes in January, I'll pull out some so you can see what I mean by it's going to come in a stack like this. And we may or may not have kept all the originals because sometimes there's so many we just make copies of this like they did, but I'll try to find something, okay, for you, just so you see that. Now, this all goes somewhere, right? So let's look at our forms, okay? We've got a DIV and an INT. So where do you see a DIV and an INT in some of your other forms here? Anybody find where it's going to go?
Schedule B.
Schedule B, yes. So DIVs and INTs, Schedule B. Now, the fun part is all we have to write is the name of the payer and the amount. So on your Schedule B, you're going to look over here at your DIV. Let's see, what's interest is first. So interest income was $13.15. Okay? So you're going to put the payer was T. Robert Pierce. Very, very top. That's who paid that out. And then the interest is $13.15. I'm looking for... Okay. Okay, and then the DIV at the bottom, okay, what's our DIV say? 1560.10. Mm-hmm.
Okay, it was T. Roberts.
Yep, still T. Roberts, yep. Yet again, guys, if you're doing it on the software, the only difference is you're typing versus writing, okay? And in the software, you might actually put this on a line. The new software may just have a box. It may not pull this up specifically or this. We don't know yet what it's going to look like. The old version would pull this up and we'd literally bloop and bloop. But the new version may just be a box. It may say, enter your interest. Enter this. It may not be. Now, will there be somewhere on the return in itself we could view this form? Probably. It'll probably have a view form and we can pull it up and actually look at the form itself. Just make sure I get that close so you can see it. Because you may want to watch it back and be able to look at it. And if my husband watches it, because he's been skipping out. I'm kidding. He's not. He's got the baby. But he may want to look at this too. Okay, so we've done that. Now, They've grayed out all at the bottom because we're not doing any kind of income, foreign income or anything like that. We don't usually see that. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. If you'll notice, at the bottom of the first section, it says enter the results here, and on form 1040, line 2B. Okay? So whatever your interest section there was, you're going to go put it on 2B on your 1040. So 1040, our summary page, we're going to put that 13.15 for interest up there on 2B over here at the side margin. Okay? We're going to put that there. And then our dividend, we're going to put that on 3B. 3B. Okay?
Okay.
Now, we did have other things on that INT and DIV. We had tax-exempt interest, qualified dividends, and total capital gain distributions. Those all, let me double check again. Qualified dividend. Okay? Those have a different spot. So, say for instance, your qualified dividend is 3A. Your gain distribution is, I just saw it a minute ago. That may go on my other page, unless y'all see it.
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, I think it goes on my other page, so leave that one off for a second. Qualified dividends is going to go on 3A. Your tax-exempt interest is going to go on 2A. Okay? And if those are exempt and they're not going to roll over, then that will just stay in its spots. Okay?
So these don't get moved over.
Correct. Correct.
So tax exempt interest is gonna go on the
2A.
110,
2A. Yep.
And the 1,000 qualified dividends goes on 3A.
Yes.
Okay.
Capital gain distribution.
Yeah, that's the one
I got kind of lost.
I couldn't find it.
Yeah, and I may have to go look myself on my cheat sheet. Actually, no, I see where it goes. Okay, so that's all you can do with all of that. Now we're going to have to move on to the stock, the bottom of the stock, the hard, kind of the more difficult part, the 1099B. Okay, proceeds from the barter exchange. Okay, now it's a little confusing because you actually do those on the capital gains page. Okay, this is one of those times where it doesn't really match up with what it says per se with your form. So the income is a barter and broker form, but you're actually putting it on a Schedule D. Okay? I know it's a little confusing, but, and if you look, it says you report this on 8949. Okay? So you're going to come over to the 8949. Okay? That's kind of your, these are almost the same. Okay, but this is like your reporting page, and then this is kind of where we put it all together, per se, before it goes on the 1040. So these always go together. Okay, the 8949 and then the Schedule D always go together. The good thing is, you won't have to pull those up in the software will do it for you. When you know it's a stock, it'll all be there together. And you won't even have to roll it. You'll enter it in one time and it'll all show up. You just want to kind of verify it as you go that you're typing it in correctly. Okay, so we're going to do 8949, and if you look at that, okay, you've even got on your 1099B at the bottom, it says 50 shares of HTT, whatever that is. It's got the date acquired, date sold, proceeds, cost, etc., etc. So you're just going to fill it out on your page here. Now, let's be careful, because if you look there's 2 pages. So there's a short term and a long term, okay? And it's going to tell you. So if you look on your classwork, the short term's listed first, long term's listed below. And it will always tell you, because we have no way to know. It'll tell us, okay? Now, if it doesn't tell us, how do we know what's a short term or a long term? Does anybody remember the time period on that?
Like year or less, 12 months or less.
12 months or less, and then long term is
Greater than-
over a year?
Over a year.
Perfect. Because I always forget it. So then, if it didn't literally say it, you could look at the date bought and the date sold, right? And see if that's under the year, over the year, that sort of thing. But they actually tell you. So they told us that top box is short term, bottom box is long term. So you're just going to fill it out. So you look at the 8949, you've got description. So we're just literally going to put, what's that first one? 50 shares, HTT. And then you go all the way across. And then the short-term box was the basis reported. Cost or other basis. So yes. So that's going to be box A, showing the basis. Okay?
Are we on the 8949 right now?
Yes.
Okay.
And so you can just go straight across. That's just that first one, HTT 50 shares. You can fill all that out. Proceeds, cost, other basis. You don't have to worry about line F or G. You're usually not going to have anything there. And then on the very last line, you're going to put the gain or the loss. So how do we figure a gain or a loss? Well, if you buy it for low and sell for high, you have a gain. If you buy for high and sell it cheap, you have a loss, right? Okay? And guys, while we're filling these out, there are some circumstances where you can roll over losses for other years. You will know that inside of the return. If it's something that if they have a bunch of losses, you can roll to another year. With that being said, if you have someone that comes in and has a lot of stocks, has some kind of property they've sold, has things like that going on, you always want to see, especially if they're a new client or with this new software coming out, hey, do you know if you have any losses from last year or anything you can use on this year? Because sometimes you may have somebody that has quite a few assets or stocks where they roll over losses, things of that nature. This last year we had a lady that had, I think, a house fire. She lost a bunch of stuff and she had some rollover losses. And so we had to look those up from the prior year return. Okay?
A question. 8949 part 1, the short term.
Uh-huh.
It talks about that note that aggregate all the short term transactions on form 1099B.
Yes.
And so does it indicate that, does it imply that you don't necessarily have to use 8949? You just aggregate them all on schedule on schedule D?
You can, okay, so what they did this last year or two is they started letting us do like a summary page.
Okay.
So if someone had 10 of them listed, you could if you wanted, because usually like the one they give us is only one of each. Usually there is a summary that would say total loss, total gain. It was a little harder to find in the software last year. Sometimes we couldn't get it to pull up, so we just put them all individually. But there was a box that said, do you want to use the summary page? And it would let us put all the short term in one setting. Because sometimes people will do 10, 15, 20 stock buys and purchases and whatever. So you can imagine if you're filling that in. I think I had one client, I only had a few last year that had stocks, but one client had like quite a few. It literally probably took me 45 minutes to an hour just to put in the stocks. So I'm like, we need to do a drop off. This, leave us with this. Let's work through this, and we'll know if our software has that this year, has that summary option. Makes it a lot easier if it does, but we could have that option. So if it's all, if it's there, we could put it in. The only thing is, if they have the different date acquired and sold, you might want to do a different line item. But sometimes they'll have so many per case or per thing, per date, so you can do the summary. So you're going to have your short term, and then on the back, that second page would be your long term.
Right.
And then on the H, that last column, you want to have whether there's a loss or a proceed. Also, guys, I think I told you on the YouTube video, and I don't remember if I've mentioned it, the software will round. So if it's 0.50, you go up to the next dollar. If it's below 0.50, you round down. Software will automatically round for you, so you don't have to think about it. Okay. Now, all we're going to do is take what we did on the 89.49 and put it on the Schedule D. So there's not a lot of crazy here. It's just the way they have us do it. Okay? So now, up top we got short term again, right? So if you'll look and you read, it says total short-term transactions reported on the B, for which basis was reported, for which you have no adjustments. However, if you choose to leave this blank, you can go to 1B. So you can either put it there or put it on line 1B, okay? You're just going to do the sale price, the cost, and the gain or the loss. So I know it's kind of redundant and it's kind of crazy. Something I also point out at this point, because this is a good place to do that, name shown on the return on that Schedule D. I forgot to point that out and mention this to the other class. Even though we mentioned that about the W-2s, how you combine them, in most of the software, we will have to say if it's the taxpayer's income or the spouse's as we're putting it into the software. So just be sure if it's not both of theirs, we don't mark it both, okay? If it's one spouse, we put that. If it's not, we don't. I will have to stop my recording in about 2 minutes and plug my phone in, because this phone is super hard to get back on if it dies. So my husband will have a cow and a half if I don't do that.
I'm looking for the 1B, but I don't know where.
Oh, right here. That's just your amounts. So that's literally whatever you put on your short term. You just put it here. You're just rolling it from here to here. Your proceeds, your cost, and your gain or your loss. Okay? And that short term up here, down here, is your long term. Right? So that's your second, but it just matches up. It's almost exactly the same. It's like your summary form. Okay? So this would be good like if you had some where your basis wasn't reported, and your basis is what you pay.